Well, hello, Doug Kaufmann. We're so excited to have you today on this little interview. The question came to Cherilyn, and I've been asked the same thing. Pastor Scott has been asked, what do we do to prepare ourselves for the next season of whatever is coming?
Mm.
And Pastor Scott put that question to us, and my first thought was, we need to talk to Doug Kaufmann because 10 years ago, I started watching your program and I learned so much about my body and how to support my body in any season, really. And whether it was about diet, supplementation, exercise, and how to kind of steer clear of some other things that probably wouldn't be as beneficial for me. So that was my first thought. We need to talk to Doug Kaufmann. And so we're so excited for this.
And I am so blessed, especially to be there with Scott. Scott, your book changed my world. You know, a few pages into it, it changed my world. So thank you for what you do. And Pam and Cherilyn, thank you for the invitation. In order to best prepare for anything, we need to know its cause. And so let me start out by telling you a couple of friends of mine are physicians. I shared with them at a medical meeting what I thought COVID was. And I'd like to just open with a few minutes teaching you what we know. God put a fungus into the intestines of birds called Histoplasma capsulatum, either in the intestine or once the guano leaves the bat or the pigeon or the parrot. This fungus deteriorates. Fungi are saprophytes. They eat dead or decaying material. Without histoplasma in bats or birds or sparrows, the whole world, every one of our cars would be covered with bird droppings. This fungus breaks it down, especially in bats. If you go into a Google search and you say, well, what started COVID? There's going to be hundreds of papers that say somewhere in Wuhan, China, virologists went into a bat cave, and all of a sudden my mind clicked. I've been teaching about fungus for 50 years. You don't walk into a bat cave because it's dark and it's dirty and it's damp. You shuffle in. Now, they would have had booties on, they would have had masks on, because they're working with a virus that they didn't know much about, SARS-CoV-2, in bats. They were actually doing fecal extractions on the bats. So they're going in there with their little devices and they're testing droppings from bats, which is known to have this SARS-CoV-2 in it. But they shuffled in. They disrupted the dirt where this histo is. The histo flew into the air and they inhaled, either directly or indirectly. With masks, we now know a lot more about masks than we did 3 years ago. And then they, believe it or not, took some of the bats with them, put them in their car, took their booties and coats off and masks off and hats, bonnets off, and got in the car, and they exhaled. All of this inhaled histoplasma would have been exhaled. There's RNA and sometimes DNA in these viruses, but there's only DNA in fungi. Now, what we've been accusing Dr. Fauci and many others of is what we call gain of function in a laboratory, taking a virus and twisting it. And you do that under a sterile hood, and you go in there and you pull this DNA. It's combining the structures, nucleic acids. But most people don't know that change of function happens at night while we're sleeping. It's called something different. It's called genetic fusion. So the DNA from histoplasma, what they messed up on the floor of the bat cave, and the RNA from this COVID virus merged. You didn't need a hood. You didn't need technicians. It happens. It happens all the time. A 2019 study by Baylor University out here in Texas proved that nucleic acids share spontaneously their structures. And what happens is a brand new form is born. We call it a hybrid. If indeed I'm right, and these doctors seem to think I was right, so they asked me to put a whole continuing medical education course together for doctors. It took me about a month, but I did it. It is remarkable how what we're calling COVID-2 and what I know is histoplasmosis, the disease caused by inhalation of Histoplasma capsulatum, that which breaks down droppings from birds, how they share similarities. In order to get sick and die of Histoplasma capsulatum, you have to inhale it. It can then begin to cause bizarre symptoms in your body. Oh, by the by, in order to get sick from COVID, you had to inhale it. It can then begin to break down and cause misery in your body. So my take on what we call the etiology, the cause of COVID, I think without Dr. Fauci knowing, I don't know if there's a bad guy. I don't study that. I don't believe Dr. Fauci or any immunologist or virologist understands, because I study cancer, understands genetic mutations. They happen all the time. I think our DNA merges with fungus we get into our body, and that fungal DNA and human DNA cleave, and a new hybrid is born. And it's born in a lump form. Fungi collect in a sac, a little white rubbery sac, like a cancer tumor. And they do that to prevent phagocytosis, white blood cells, from gobbling them up. There's power in numbers. So I think, and what are we finding now with all of the postmortem autopsies on COVID patients? God bless them. Huge, huge, huge numbers of patients have fungal infections. I called it 3 years ago. I think what you're going to end up finding when you open these patients up is either black tar, mucor, fungus, black mold, or histoplasmosis, bird dropping, which we're finding, aspergillus. Histo tips your immune system down, immunosuppression, and while it's down, any virus we're exposed to can take form and begin to grow through our body. I think we put all attention on a virus and very little attention what was on the boots of those virologists when they went into the bat caves and brought the bats with their DNA and their fecal samples with RNA into their laboratory. We aren't at the point in science where doctors understand genetic fusion. This is something I put together about 20 or 30 years ago, the germ that causes cancer. In that, you'll see human DNA converging with fungal DNA and forming a little hybrid down at the bottom. This book is all about how fungus causes human cancer. And I got so many nice comments from all the doctors that attended that meeting. When you look at the symptoms of fungal diseases and you look at the symptoms of COVID, SARS-CoV-2, they are virtually identical. And one doctor said to me, yeah, but what about the incubation period? And it wasn't in my seminar, in my talk. 2 to 17 days for histoplasmosis, 2 to 17 days for COVID-19. So now that you better understand, I believe we have postmortem exams to prove that at least in some people, fungus was a huge deal. I believe that fungi made this either an epidemic and pandemic or of no value. The 15-year-olds weren't affected at all. The 70-year-olds were affected horribly. The older we get, the less our immune system adapts, the more vulnerable we become to what we call pathogens. Histoplasma is a pathogen from bird droppings that causes a disease called histoplasmosis, and it can't be discerned from a disease called COVID. Based on that premise, and you asked the great question there, Pam, is there another pandemic coming down the pike here? And if so, let's drop back and study what we learned from the first one. We learned that older people, those with comorbidities, so we got to take good care of our health. I'm 74 this year. You got to take good care of your health. We learned that people who are deficient in zinc, who had almost no cholecalciferol, vitamin D3, in their body, who had very little vitamin C in their body, were the ones who became very vulnerable to this very quickly. Aging is a big deal. We're all going through it, right? It's a big deal. And what I discovered 50 years ago when I got back from Vietnam, or 52 years ago, I would take grandma to the doctor. I'd take my dad to the doctor. He had a pacemaker. He had prostate problems. He had heart problems. He had all sorts of health problems. And I remember thinking back then at that young age, I don't want to go to doctors. So you're looking down the camera here at someone who doesn't have a doctor. I don't know what a PSA exam is. I don't know, what normal blood pressure is. I don't know what my cholesterol is. But I do things differently, and that's what I'm going to hope I can teach your audience. Age is chronologic, but my aging has really been a study in physiology. We have a physiological age and a chronologic age. Yesterday, for half an hour, I have one of those little maxi climbers. These are great little machines. They used to be $300 when I bought my first one. Now they're $150. But boy, your core and your arms and your rear and your legs really work on that. And you do that for 10 minutes. Then I do my push-ups and all my other weight training and so forth. At 73, now in the summer I'll swim. You got to exercise. That's another thing we found with COVID. Those who lived sedentary lives, who this is the most exercise they got. They went home from work, sat on the couch, and pushed the remote control. I have a favorite saying that I've shared on television for decades, and that is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Do you feel great at 50 or 60 years old? Then you're doing something right. Are you running from doctor to doctor to doctor? Or are you biting your nails? Oh no, there's another one coming. This is going to be COVID-23 and then COVID-27. Prep. Get ready for it. There may be another big one coming. We've made it through the last one. How did we do that? We were either young or extremely healthy. We now know the role of diet in the disease process. We know much more than we even did in 2020. I think the grand sum of what I've learned over the past 3 years is this: we need to prepare for the next one. Somebody did quite well on this one. Somebody did quite well. We're looking at these huge mega companies that all of a sudden got, boom, go ahead and let's start with vaccines. Let's start with, oh no, that drug doesn't work, but this $3,000 one will work better. And the one thing that I think boggled my mind, as I was doing my live show and my television show, I kept seeing the Z-Pack. This is a virus. Why are they on antibiotics? And I kept seeing Z-Pack, azithromax, given to everyone who had COVID. Doctors know better. This isn't a bacterial problem. And then I pulled this. I don't see that. Pulled this off the internet. And this was in 2013. The FDA warns that the antibiotic Zithromax can cause irregular heart activity like myocarditis. That's interesting. Why did they do that if they knew this 7 years before? Then I pulled this one. And this is from Dermatology Therapies 2020. Z-Pack and COVID-19 prompt early use at first signs of this infection in adults and children, an approach worthy of consideration. Wait a minute. You said it was hurting and killing people. Why is it worthy of your consideration? I'm sorry, you guys, but I look at this under different medical eyes than most people do. And if there is any scientific validity to my assumption that bat droppings played a role in this, and if there is a diet that we can prevent the next onslaught of these viruses, if there is a supplement that I can take every day, then I think it warrants our investigating it today and not waiting for 6 months when COVID-23 comes down the pike. Number one, I'd be very careful of Zithromax. Number two, I'd follow a diet, and there is one, that starves fungus. Number three, I know that people deficient vitamin C and zinc, and the B vitamins like niacin, and what else do we find? Vitamin D3. I'd get on those inexpensive ones and begin to prep myself. But most importantly, I think exercise is another good idea. I'm sorry, you were going to jump in. And I'm not letting you. I have the gift of gab. My wife should be sitting in the middle. She'd be going,
no, you're great. I have the gift of question now. But I was curious to help me connect the fungal and the virus and transmission. If you're not in a bat cave, breathing in, how is the transmission happening with the combined piece? Is that how it's happening because they've now combined and the virus is transporting the fungus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So what grows from this is called genetic fusion. RNA can fuse onto, man, that's a good looking virus. I want to ask her out. Boom. When this occurs in a laboratory, a new RNA is born. It's procreation. And I wrote this book some 20 years ago when I put that human DNA and fungal DNA converged to make a hybrid alone. We didn't know until 2019, thanks to Baylor, that mammalian nucleic acids, mammals, us, and animals, have RNA and DNA. They're called nucleic acids. And the DNA can hook onto the RNA. Now, what you'd end up with, in that case, Cherilyn, was for all intents and purposes something that looks exactly like a virus, but responds favorably to, antifungals, let's say hydroxychloroquine.
Okay.
It's zinc. Remember, they were giving patients zinc. They started them on colchicine, which is a gout drug, and it did well. Gout drugs kill fungus because gout is a fungal disease. And it just every day, one of these doctors would text me or call me and say, you might be right because, the transmission, they're both respiratory illnesses. You can inhale histo. It lowers your immune system. It's a virus that cleaves onto it. And now the whole world believes that we have a viral infection without understanding that its roots might be fungal. In that case, it would respond favorably to antifungal drugs that they have used for it. Okay. So I think what we're dealing with here is a virus that's behaving like a fungus because it has fungal DNA along with it.
So when I think about breathing in, and the respiratory tract, of course, is your first line of defense. So your nasal passages and those types of things. What does that look like to keep that part of your body healthy, or to respond when you feel that attack coming to an acute?
Really good question. The medical answer, it's funny. I was a corpsman, a hospital corpsman in Vietnam, emergency, wild year for me. And I wanted to become a doctor. More than anything in the world, I wanted to become a doctor. And I was dating a girl at the time. She said, why are you going through all this? And I want to be a doctor. And one day she said to me, why do you want to be a doctor? And my answer was one word. And I thought about that for weeks after. Money. I want money. I don't know. And all of a sudden, God changed my life dramatically. And here I am today teaching, in many networks in 200 countries. I'm teaching about what I didn't learn in medical training. The medical answer, you see, was a mask. And when that didn't work, the medical answer was two masks. And I'm sitting in my chair at home, rolling over laughing, and they were serious. My answer is to get here's a $25 bottle of colloidal silver. This is a good one called nano silver. And it gets something like this. The same company, this is a company called Optavita. The same company sells these little bottles. Eye drops, nasal spray, throat spray. And before you go to bed in the evening, couple of squirts. Your mucus, secretory IgA, your mucous membrane tissues grab on to this virus fungal combo, I believe. And so you want to stop it when it first, prevent it from adapting to you.
Right.
But then know, Cherilyn, that if someone sneezes near you or so forth, you've got protection inside the nose, inside the mouth, the buccal cavity, inside the eyes for $25. Mm-hmm. And that bottle has lasted me a long, long period of time. And then protecting the gut. This is one of my advertisers. This is a product called NSC Max. NSC Max, a nutritional supply company. This is beta-glucan, which has been studied now since the 1950s for its involvement and use in cancer. I take 100 milligrams of this every morning. I was traveling and lecturing in 2017. I was the big man on campus. I was going to Ty and Charlene Bollinger's The Truth About Cancer, lecturing there, then to Dr. Wu's seminars, lecturing there. And I didn't order. I thought, come on, I'm going to be on a plane for 2 months traveling, and I'm very important. I'm giving lectures to doctors. And I didn't take it. Man, when I got home, within 2 days, I drove myself to a little corner, one of those little corner shops where doctors are. And I knew exactly what I had. He confirmed it. And I knew exactly the antibiotic I needed. Medications can be life-saving if used properly. Life-taking if not used properly. That's the only time I've stopped taking this in 20 years. And I proved I wasn't that important. I got the bacterial infection and I came out of it. During the past, say, 30 or 40 years, I've probably taken antibiotics 2 or 3 times. Each time I knew when I needed it, and I took appropriate actions. I have a large number of doctor friends who would have written me a prescription, but I don't want to call, that loan due. So I just go to it's amazing, these little corner shops, emergency rooms I have an old man card I carry with me called Medicare, and you give it to them and it's free. Get anything. So that's the way I do my medicine. But these 2 products, beta-glucan and something that coats the secretory membranes in your body. This, of course, coats the gut and so forth. This modulates the immune system. This product's been published by medical schools widely for decades, and nobody knows about it till I started my show. Now the company NSC, it's nsc24.com, makes this available in a 3 milligram for kids, a 10 milligram that you might take as every day. And then I take the big boy, the 100 milligram, because try as I might, I'm not getting younger. And so those 2 things, and then looking at a good make sure the B complex is in there, make sure it has vitamin D3, zinc, and some of the other minerals. There's so many good ones out there for $20, $30 a month. During these times, I think prepping, being on the defense, getting your immune system ready is everything. Now, we spoke a little bit about diet. A diet, fungi thrive on carbohydrates. To you and me, sugars. When you chew up cereal in the morning, that converts to glucose, sugar. So avoid the pastas and cereals and things of that sort, and eat more vegetables. It just amazes me. I was reading Leviticus. I started my 1-year Bible over again, and reading Leviticus, I'm just blown away. I give you every green plant, and that will be yours for food. And people ask me all the time, Doug, should we be eating genetically modified foods? You are, if you shop at a regular store. What does God say about that? With seed of like kind, with seed of like kind, with seed of like kind, all over the Bible. What did we do? We put seeds together to resist disease. Purportedly, we were told 30 years ago, we're going to feed mankind. We're going to send all this food to Africa and take care of but in fact, it's now, our food is slipping, you guys. Our food is slipping. We need to be very, very cautious. If you don't have a garden, probably be a good idea to dig up your backyard and think about planting some green food and being cautious. Our tomatoes, soybeans, so many foods now are genetically modified. And who do we trust?
So, Doug, could you go into a little bit more the Kaufmann diet and why the foods that you recommend on the Kaufmann diet are on there? The other question I had was, we hear more and more and more doctors that are treating people that have long haulers from COVID or have an autoimmune disorder are saying more and more intermittent fasting. And I keep hearing the word autophagy, which I don't understand fully what that means, but accessing the autophagy in your body is the way I understand it. But you have to do that through fasting. Can you maybe go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so turning off the ability of the body to consume, cannibalize itself is what they're talking about. Diet. I want to just let me. I pulled this out, Doug. I'm a registered nurse. I put my stage 1 GYN cancer into remission with your recommendations: antifungal, plant-based diet. I've been RN for 40 years. I refuse chemo, surgery, radiation. I have hundreds of these. I didn't counsel these people. I did a TV show. I don't ask for these. They just send it in. I'm still so thankful. After 25 years, I am still cancer-free. I met you that long ago. It's diet is so crucial that I found it necessary to start it. My own a diet that would starve fungus. And let me tell you how this happened. When I got back from Vietnam, I had miserable symptoms. One of them was I worked with Dr. Everett Hughes at USC Medical School on the 8th floor. If I got on an elevator with anyone else, and you couldn't fake it back then, you couldn't hold a cell phone, and pretend like it, my heart would beat out of its chamber. I began sweating. I was so nervous. That wasn't me before I went to Vietnam. I had horrible stomach problems. My hair, I combed my hair one day and a patch came out in the back. Skin, I had jungle rot on my skin, and it was horrible and bloody and itchy. And one day, Dr. Hughes said to me, have you thought about changing your diet? He said, what is your diet, Doug? And I said, well, okay, I'm 21 years old. My diet is bologna sandwiches, Coors beer, and chocolate chip cookies. And he said, okay, you might want to rethink that. And he was this really neat old guy. And so I rethought it. 2 weeks later, I get in there and my heart's beating. And I said, I'm sorry, Dr. Hughes, I just don't feel good. Did you change your diet? And I said, yeah, I did. And he said, okay. And I said, I'm now drinking Budweiser beer, eating oatmeal cookies and salami sandwiches. So I have dealt with this for 50 years, working with various people. You got to change your diet. Okay, so you can't eat dairy. How come you're still sick? Well, I had some cottage cheese last night. That couldn't be it. You know where I'm going with this. Diet is something, because we don't teach our doctors a thing. They learn biochemistry, the breakdown of foods, but they don't learn clinical nutrition. I had to make this so simple, and God has been in my life forever. I go to the library. We didn't have, hey, Siri, what's an antifungal diet? I get a library card at USC. I go to the library. I pick up a book because Dr. Hughes said, did you eat raw fish? And I said, that's right. We were cleaning an operating room one day, and these Vietnamese women came in to help us, and they brought what was called Nook Mom, raw fish and rice. And we loved it. We ate it, and the next day they brought more. Absolutely loved it. So I said, yes, Dr. Hughes, I ate raw fish. You might have a parasite. So I get a book at the library that says Parasitology, circa 1956. Get up and go to the bathroom. When I get back, it's open to this chapter. I kid you not. I still get goosebumps. And the chapter was Yeast and Fungi Parasitizing Man. I had learned that what I had, all of this jungle rot, was a mycobacterium, which is a yeast type of growth. And I thought, wait a minute, could those little buggers have gotten underneath and gotten into my body? So in that book, it talked about how yeast are saprophytes, the bird dropping, the bat dropping, but they can also parasitize man. Once on board, many of them off-gas poisons. They're called mycotoxins. And these mycotoxins can cause neurotoxicity. I can't get on an elevator with anybody. My mouth gets dry. My heart beats out of its chamber. It can cause everything from alopecia, hair loss, to zits. And so it's said that yeast and fungi carbohydrates feed yeast and fungi. So I had to go get another book. What's a carbohydrate? And so I learned from humble beginnings long ago that my diet had to be low carb. At the same time, I learned a big university in the US was doing research on something called a ketogenic diet. They were backing off epilepsy in children that suffered from petite or grand mal seizures by taking the kids off of carbohydrates, almost virtually 5% carbohydrates. So I put a diet together of eggs. Oh, it was horrible. You guys would laugh. Eggs, like I'd make 24 hard-boiled eggs, carry in a little bag, carrot sticks, celery sticks, what else? Fish sticks back then was a big deal, but I couldn't eat the corn on the outside of the fish stick, so I'd peel it off. But I felt great after a week. Nobody saw how I ate, but I felt great. I could get on that elevator. This began clearing up. Everything started to get better. So I formed from that about 42, 43 years ago, a Kaufmann diet. I thought I was the only man in the world with a yeast problem. I was laughed out of every baseball game if I mentioned it. But it turns out that men and women suffer from systemic mycoses, yeast problems. As a matter of fact, prostatitis is more likely a yeast problem than a bacterial problem. But I digress. There is a diet that I put together, and here's how funny it became. So I knew what foods I ate, and I felt great, but I got to give the people, nutritionists at the university were telling us, Doug, you're going to kill people if they don't get grains. This grain is important. And we didn't know what whole grains were back then, but these wonderful women would tell me, you got to put more carbs in. So I'm sitting in the barbershop getting a haircut, and I pick up a 1926 Woman's Day magazine, and on the cover it says green apples have almost no fructose, whereas red apples, delicious apples. So that became part of my Kaufmann diet. Who knew back then? We didn't know. Carrots have a lot of sugar, but carrots also have falcarinol. Doctors don't know about falcarinol. Falcarinol kills fungus. And so I had to put one and one together and put a diet together, which I did, a very strict diet for people with long COVID, with cancer, with diabetes, and a less strict diet as you graduate from Kaufmann 1 to Kaufmann 2. I now add some more fruits back in, and I allow beans, which are high in carbohydrates, back in, and so forth. So that's in its infancy how the Kaufmann diet, which is now hugely popular. I am humbled. Never forget having lunch with Dr. Robert Atkins, and he would eat in New York. I'd go back there and visit him. He would eat bacon and eggs. No toast today, Doc? No toast. And the guy looked great. He felt great. And he was one of my many, many mentors in this field, that it's okay to eat meat. It's okay not to have cereal or toast or pasta. So that's kind of the diet I live today, in keeping with what we were talking about earlier. How do I plan? I'm going to die. Man's mortal. But keeping myself in my old age from doctors' offices, which means no prescriptions, which means I think I'm going to live longer because of that, keeping up an exercise program, and then watching the foods I eat, organic as possible. I eat organically as much as possible, and I avoid genetically modified and highly chemicalized foods, artificial sugars, and the list is almost endless. My wife and I are a bit paranoid, but at 73, I watched my dad just crumble and fall, and so far, where's the wood? Knock on wood, it's going really good.
That's awesome. So the Kaufmann diet is a diet that basically is starving fungus. Is it also is that the best way to get rid of fungus, is simply starve it to death? Or are there things that literally also proactively, like how does a 14-year-old fly through COVID? Like what's happening in their body innately that allows them to do that we then sort of, as we get older, need to compensate for, that our body's not doing as efficiently?
Right. We've studied longevity and senescence, the aging body, for 100 years. The only thing we know with certainty, and this is really biblical, the only thing we know with certainty is when we fast, our body doesn't go into, some of these autophagy disorders that we see. We also know that Metchnikoff, 100 years ago, Dr. Metchnikoff watched people who ate old milk. And for reasons we don't understand, isn't that bacteria? They lived much, much longer and much, much healthier. And along 50 years ago, into American medicine came probiotics. So diet, why doesn't a 14-year-old go through that? 14-year-olds, you take their blood and look at their immune systems. We've done all this, just powerful immune systems. But as we age, our immunity begins to wax and wane. Our hormones decline, everything. This isn't fun, what we have to go through. But we do. And we know with certainty we become more vulnerable to the flu, to cancer, to the diseases of aging. If only there were a diet to stave that off. Since I published the cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's are fungal disorders, and I look, like you asked, Pam, of long COVID, I have friends with it. It's amazing how something like caprylic acid from a health food store. Caprylic acid is a coconut-derived fatty acid, and fatty acids, like omega-3 fatty acid, are antifungal. So caprylic acid and a diet where you don't throw down sugars or glucose or grains really helps to arrest that continuum. The diet, I didn't know what I was on to, but again, you ask, how God impacted my life. I didn't know that the Kaufmann diet would become something this valuable, but it has for many people. And you don't need to buy my books. The Kaufmann diet says, stay away from grains. They're not what we were taught. And friends of mine, neurologist Dave Perlmutter, wrote a book called Grain Brain. They all have been here. I've interviewed all of them. They know I'm a one fun guy, fungus guy. And so they learn, and a lot of them end up, but David, came before me. A lot of them then go out and write books about fungus. So can one little guy, not a doctor, make a difference? When God sees to it, when he plants that seed, it gets done. And then along comes Scott's brother. This show was so poorly produced 20 years ago, we laughed at it. I'd be in the middle of a sentence and the networks had just, okay, today we're going to talk about, boom, I'm gone. It was so poorly produced. And then I met a guy, God introduced me to a guy named John. Brilliant. What I wanted was this little black book. He knew everybody in Hollywood. He had their telephone numbers. And then I saw his work. He produced the first weekly health show in the United States some 30 years ago. And I wanted him on my team. And so for almost 20 years, he's been every step of the way. Every step of the way. I don't know if you two have seen this, but you need to if you haven't. There was an article in this big journal, Circulation, Heart Journal, that it just came out a few days ago. Circulating spike protein detected in post-COVID-19 vaccine myocarditis. So I went back and studied this from some of the other medical journals. How long do messenger RNA and spike proteins last in the body? Oh, for a few hours to a couple of weeks. And here, 2 years later, they're finding these spike proteins, which are supposed to dissipate, poof, gone. They're finding a medical journal. They're finding, what was that? A notable finding was that markedly elevated levels of full-length spike proteins unbound by antibodies were detected in the plasma of individuals with post-vaccine myocarditis. They're supposed to be gone. This new technology. So many people ask me, what's the difference between the messenger RNA and a regular vaccine like we got when we were kids? The way God made our immune system is it gets prompt when we get a little bit of the germ in us. That's what the polio, Salkbeck, that's what every, mumps, rubella, et cetera. So you give a little bit of live or dead antigen. The way God made our body is an antigen, a foreign protein, is anything that can elicit an immune response. Cat dander, ragweed, milk. But in this case, COVID. An antigen makes an antibody or cleaves on. It's called an immune complex. The antigen antibody complex prompts immunomemory. Aha, here comes ragweed again. This time I'm going to protect you from it. Messenger RNA doesn't use an antigen. That was my 3 years ago. Okay, well, let's see the antigen. We don't have it. Yet all these people are sick and dying of it. You don't have the antigen? No, we're coming out with a protein that's going to prompt on the COVID surface. We have these spike proteins, and we're going to give an injection to activate those to make the antigen. I'm sorry, guys, I'm not an immunologist. I have studied it, but I don't understand this at all. Why wouldn't you hyper accelerate your immune system and become hyper responsive to everything, not just COVID, but everything in your environment? So I don't fully understand it, but I do know we're saying whoops a little bit too often now. And I am 100% for people who have taken that vaccine. I fully understand people who haven't taken it. Let's wait a little bit. Let's wait another year. Let's wait a couple of years. But I think what we're going to find is this mRNA vaccine may still be doing things in the body of people who have had the booster, 1 or 2 boosters, et cetera. And we're learning. We're learning a lot about this. And I wish we would have studied this carefully before we went into this so quickly. That's my position. I'm not an immunologist, but I'm telling you, we just learned a few days ago.
Are you finding any connection between the fungus and the spike protein, and if the fungus is causing the body to hold on to the spike protein maybe longer than it should, or not be able to get rid of it? Is there any research on that?
No.
Okay.
I'm a lone wolf. I'm the only guy who had that, but that makes sense, Cherilyn, and I'll tell you why. If in fact you become hyper vigilant, your immune system, there isn't a spike protein. There's a lot of one of them to COVID. Okay, that's good. That was supposed to protect us. Now you won't get COVID. Whoops. Could we be spiking to fungus that was dormant? The histo, the aspergillus, the candida that was supposed to be dormant, could we now be spiking with that? That's how I opened today, was when we take a cadaver and look at it, we're finding just gross growth of something we didn't know those patients had. And I'll take it a step further. Many pathologists haven't seen large amounts of yeast and fungus. Yeast is single cell fungus. Haven't seen large amounts of that inside people. So that's a good hypothesis. We could be spiking to the fungus now. We could be spiking to all it said, free spike antigen. Free spike antigen. I thought there wasn't an antigen. Free spike antigen was detected in the blood of adolescents and young adults who developed post-mRNA vaccine myocarditis. So, we continue science. How I wish I could tell people science changes hourly. If you contend you know science, you're not the guy for me. Science changes all the time, and it requires that we sit in meetings and discuss all of this, not rush to market with products.
So this is after the research that I've looked at, this is one of my thoughts, I guess, is that if the spike protein is sort of priming the immune system to hyper focus on one particular thing, then it's not maybe focusing on other things it's supposed to be doing. And so is there, in your understanding, if that's even a relevant theory, is there a way to sort of get the immune system awake again to be more balanced and to not just put all of its energy onto this one particular pathogen that has been, either caught or shot, but to reestablish the synergy and the balance that the immune system is supposed to have, so that perhaps if it's not paying attention to fungus right now because it's giving all of its attention over here to this spike protein, we can awaken it to, hey, you also need to continue to get rid of this fungus or get rid of this virus or get rid of, those other things that are happening in the body. Is that a relevant theory?
Sure. And I think it begs a bigger question, and that is, if we have this, and it's now, we understand, making free spike antigens continuously, not for a few days, continuously in our body, how do we settle that? How do we subdue that? Is there a way to detoxify? So there are so many areas I could go in, but sweating detoxifies the body. We know that. So a near or a far infrared sauna. I have one in my home. I also, even when it's cold outside, I work out. And I don't binge sweat. Yesterday it was so cold here, it was freezing, but still I'm wearing a sweatshirt, so you get a little sweat going. In the summer, vitamin D. God made no mistake putting the sun here. And so what I'll do, I have this little hideaway at my home out by the pool. Nobody can see me. So I'll pull my shirt off and do my, always looking around, being hyper vigilant. Nobody's looking, doing my little exercise, my push-ups and so forth. And I fall into the pool. Sweating is good. I give you every green plant that's yours for food. I gave you the sun. And then listen, if indeed there is a fungal etiology, or let's argue a viral etiology, and that's now circulating in our blood, seems to say what's going on. How do we detox the human body? It's interesting that we have Redmond clay. There are these various clays that work real well. You can bathe them, and et cetera. But the one I like is called psyllium, P-S-Y-L-L-I-U-M. Psyllium fiber binds pathogens in our tummy. Antibiotics, I think, start that problem when we're very young. Antibiotics are fungal metabolites, poisonous fungal metabolites. They have to be to kill living bacteria. A little bit, tiny amounts of antibiotics are wonderful. Larger amounts of antibiotics, increase intake of antibiotics, so says many scientific journals, increases our risk of cancer, breast, colorectal, prostate, skin. It's amazing. Lung cancer. It's amazing as I studied this. And what did we do when COVID came along? We threw one of the most dangerous antibiotics at older Americans living in retirement homes. What did we think they were going to do? Thrive? The whole thing opened my eyes, and it was good, because out of this, we all are beginning to question medicine. We're beginning to question science.
Yeah.
And I think it's about time.
It is. And I really want to highlight that because, my natural health journey goes back 25 or so years, but really what it really made an impression on me was I began to understand God did not leave us here without resources. Like, he literally gave us this incredible immune system. He gave us the fruits of the trees, the leaves of the trees for the healings of the nation. And, my parents were some of the first to get COVID in their county, and they were the first to get COVID in their county. And I just immediately knew, God, you have an answer for this. And so I think there's this ideology that, that tree of I'm smarter than God, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, where it's like, no, man actually is smarter. Like, all these millennia that have gone before was just waiting for this time period where man could finally illustrate that he's smarter than God. And it's like, if there's anything that we have proven over the last 2 years, it is that we are not smarter than God. And that this idea that we can hyperprime or take over, hijack the immune system and do a better job than God, I think is one thing I really want people to wake up to, is that if your first answer is, not that physicians are all bad, but if your first answer is them without understanding the majestic way that God created your body and what he did put in the earth and what he told us to avoid, that should be your first stop. And if you're not educated in that, it's time to get educated. And I hope if nothing else over the last 2 years, people have learned that. We've been doing this for a long time, and it's overwhelming at first. But to take that first step of just to make one change, just add some supplements, just have these things on hand. Begin learning, go to your website and start learning and educating about how the body actually works and why covering a symptom is not the same thing as supporting the body's innate immune system. So that's my little speech, but I just wanted to just highlight that for people, because I really want people to get that God has answers.
That was eloquent. That is what I try and teach people. We're human. We're going to listen to something. And paraded in front of us, every network for 3 years has been prominent physicians telling us, I'm science.
Right.
Carry this, I hope I have it. Carry this little silver ingot in my pocket. And on the back it says, fear not, for I am with you. I learned 50 years ago to listen to me. I had a funny thing happen. I mentioned that I don't have a doctor. So this guy called in and said, well, what do you do, for prostate? What do I do? I don't even know if it's there. And you don't go to a doctor? Why? And let me just tell you my mentality. If my prostate, were the size of a golf ball, I'd know. There are ways men know. And then how would I address that? That's right. I had a beer. Alcohol is a known carcinogen. Men don't want to hear that. Women don't hear, we're supposed to drink a glass of wine every night. Wrong. There is no safe amount of alcohol. Or I've been on antibiotics. I encourage women before a pap test, before a mammogram, men before a prostate test, don't be on antibiotics. Don't drink alcohol for a week before, and you'll probably have a nice, clean report. If there's something wrong with me, I want to know first. I don't want to, write a guy a check to tell me, I always believe in going to a doctor. If you woke up in the morning and you've got a lump somewhere you shouldn't, or you're bleeding from somewhere you shouldn't, go to a doctor. It's not the diagnosis that scares me, although many lung cancers are misdiagnosed. They're lung fungus, but that's a whole other dissertation. It's the therapy. Get the diagnosis. That's what he was trained in. But he was also trained by the pharmaceutical company to pull out of his pocket. And how many symptoms you got? 6, Doug? Okay, I want to put you on this for that, this for that. What are these? These are chemicals that will interfere with a normal physiological pathway that God put there for 6 hours at a time. Well, but I have years to live. Well, when you run out, you'll have to come back here and see me again, and I'll put you on more of it. The goal seems to me in medicine to get people on drugs when they're well. They figured out sick people all need chemicals. Hormone replacement therapy, a nightmare. We discovered in 1980, the Women's Health Initiative. Shouldn't have ever been started. Now we have statin drugs. You take healthy people and you tell them, a 208 cholesterol is, you're going to have a heart attack. I can't believe what I see going on in medicine today. And this is all culminated in what's happened in the past 3 years. It has strengthened my belief that all is not right in the field of science. And yet we are clamoring to run from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor. And each one is going to erase a symptom, because that's what he better be loyal to that medical school. Erase a symptom 4 to 6 hours at a time, as long as you keep coming back to me. I have learned to eat and exercise and supplement my way out thus far, knock on wood, please, to not have a doctor. I interview them for a living, and they're wonderful people, I need to tell you, but they are beholden. Read the Hippocratic Oath. It will blow your mind how beholden they are to the pharmacists that taught them in medical training. It's amazing.
Well, and the other issue we've seen this past year, and I've seen it the past 10 years as it's changed, is I'm in like software area, and what I've seen is as they've used more software, the software dictates the protocol, and the protocol is a one-size-fits-all protocol. And so we are seeing more and more people that are suffering simply because of the protocol, because they don't treat people as individuals. And then we have a bureaucrat who hasn't practiced medicine in maybe decades deciding what the protocol should be for every man, woman, and child in the United States. So there is also that the creativity and the art of being a doctor has been completely undermined the last 10 to 20 years. So even some very good, innate, intuitive physicians who really were digging deep, if they work for a hospital group right now, they're not really even allowed to think outside that protocol box, because that protocol box they think is what's going to save them from the malpractice suit that will result from them following the protocol.
It's amazing how accurate you are. I subscribe to 3 or 4 medical newsletters, and it's unbelievable how things have changed. You do not, and I sometimes go in there and talk about, we can communicate. You do not question what they call science. You do not question it. And if you do, these other doctors, it's like when we were kids, like teenagers, somebody gets you in a headlock, and Scott knows all about this. And you do not question them. You're called a quack. We have a word for anything that competes with normalcy.
Right.
It's called quackery. So you have to be careful. I think out of all this, all the bad we've seen, here comes the good.
Right.
Mom, you were right all along to question. Dad, you were right. It's amazing. I tell the story of when a child rides his bike and he falls down, he skins his knee, and grandma kisses it. Boom, it's all better. Then that little boy gets into medical school at age 22. Grandma was a total quack. I should have had sutures. I should have had penicillin. It's amazing the way you take normalcy and you amplify it into what we call science. God is the creator. He is the scientist. Anything else is under par. And yet these people are so self-indulged in themselves. They want to believe that science is static. You need this, you need that. You know what I read yesterday? You both would love this. Aspirin isn't needed every day to protect the heart. You got to be kidding me. My dad took aspirin every day and he died young. It's amazing to me how we will listen. We change our oil every 3,000 miles, on our car. And yet every week, when I was working in clinical nutrition at the big hospital out here, people would come up to the window, Doug, are you running on time today? Oh, yeah, I'll see you at 2:30. Good, because at 3, I've got my osteopath seeing me, and then I'm having horrible arthritis. I'm going to the rheumatologist. I have an appointment with psychiatrist. I took today off work just to see 8 of you. And I went back to my office and said, holy cow, with the exception of me, they're going to end up with 7 prescriptions. Is that good science? I don't know. I may be way off, but at least this is my opinion. I've been in it for 50 years. And thus far, I'm having a very good time, although it's difficult, of staying well, especially the older I get. I shave in the morning and I look in that mirror and I say, Dad, what are you doing here? Just it's a good life. And mine has been very good because I talked to all my friends who are now calling me, especially around the holidays. What did you eat? Who have prostate and migraines and horrible skin problems and stomach problems. And none of them say, well, Doug doesn't have those. Maybe I should try what Doug does. It's okay. I found something. My goal 50 years ago was to prevent doctor visits. So far, so good.
Well, and there is such great news coming out because there are physicians who are waking up. And that is so exciting to me to see the research and the things that are coming out, because it's so obvious that what we're doing isn't working. And I don't think it's been quite as obvious. I mean, there's a whole lot of things in the last 2 years that are a lot more obvious than they've been. And so as a result of this, there is just phenomenal research being done and still being published, and just connections being made. And I think there's such an opportunity right now to really have a deeper understanding of some things that we maybe haven't known and people haven't put emphasis on or studying time on, research time on. So there are some great things coming out. And I think for some people, they've been in the medical model for so long, it's such a source of safety for them that to walk away from that, they're not sure. It feels like they're completely untethered, like they just jumped into the deep end with no life preserver. So I think it's really important for people to know, yes, this takes some intentionality. Yes, it takes some research, but God is on your side. Like he is cheering for you. He is rooting for you. He has abundance always, always, always. And so he has absolute vested interest in your success on this journey. And so he will lead you. He will guide you, and he will help you find the things that make the biggest difference in your body. And I just believe that with all my heart. So it's not like you're all alone. And that's one of the things that we wanted to do, is just bring forward, hey, there's great resources out here. And just a little something like the Kaufmann diet, just give it a try and see maybe what difference it makes in your health.
You know, there's a saying, and this is the way we open this. What can we do? Is another one coming? How can we prepare for it? It's all about priorities, isn't it?
Right.
There's the old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Is this your priority? Or have you had COVID 3 or 4 times and you don't mind getting this one 3 or 4 times, and the litany of new vaccines and messenger RNA vaccines that'll be coming down the pike? That's okay. That's your choice. One of my priorities in taking mom or grandma, and grandma had diabetes and dad had all sorts, taking them to the doctor was, I don't want to do this. My dad at that time was 50 years old. I do not. I've been in the operating rooms in Vietnam. I've been out in the field with Marines. I mean, I don't want any more of this. And thus far, for this long, with the hiccup of this cold I got in 2017, so far so good. And I know what I did to cause that cold. Do you know what you're doing when you wake up in the morning and you're horribly constipated? Do you know what you did the night before? Those of you who are depressed, did you know selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Prozac kill fungus? I bet people didn't know that. Did you know statin drugs that we take for high cholesterol are antifungal? Did you know gout medicine is antifungal? AIDS, the one-pill vaginal yeast cure called diflucan, started as an AIDS drug, and all it does is kill fungus. Isn't this fascinating? The Old Testament references yeast, leavening, and mildew 31 times derogatorily. I love when Moses and his brother and the Lord say, I'm giving you this land of Canaan in Leviticus 14 or something. But if I put a spreading mildew, why not bacteria? Why not COVID? If I put a spreading mildew in a house in that land, you have to tell the priest. And you've got to get out of there, and you've got to burn your clothes, and the house might have to be burned down. It was a big deal thousands of years ago. And my Bible references under why was this mildew so dangerous, and I have it memorized. Mildew was a type of fungus that could spread rapidly and cause disease. You won't find a medical book that says that. Bacteria causes, viruses are killing people. Protozoa is what everybody does. The word fungus doesn't fit in medical. Vaginal yeast, little ringworm, scalp dandruff. Okay, those are due to fungus. What of cancer? What of COVID? Because that's the only one mentioned in the Word of God. Bacteria doesn't show up there. So I think if we get back to the beginning, assess our priorities, you know what? you folks are right. We've got to prevent the next one. How do we do that? It's much simpler than you think. Fear and the production of cortisol takes us down. Don't be fearful. Fear not, for I am with you. There are ways to do this. Do you feel good? Then you're on the right track.
That's amazing. I will tell you, Doug, that I probably almost nearly lost friends for promoting your information at times. If I said, you shouldn't, if you have a lung issue, I had friends that were very sick people, and they were eating corn and they were eating sugar and they were drinking alcohol. And I would try to very subtly say something about, well, did you ever think that maybe if you changed your diet? And they actually, I had friends that did listen to me. But when I saw someone before COVID, or when COVID was coming, when I would see people who had severe lung problems, or they chronically dealt with, whether they would get yearly bronchitis or whatever, I thought, oh no. Oh no. I mean, if they were already dealing with that before COVID, and this is what was attacking people in COVID, I would pray for them, because I thought they're going to be the ones that are probably going to get hit by this. And unfortunately, it was true. I lost two friends who had severe lung issues, and they did get COVID and they did pass. So
it's a horrible thing. And I'd like to say everything's fungus. It's all I've studied. I know there are other etiologies, but I don't think, like those doctors told me when I gave that course, this makes sense. If it did start in Wuhan, maybe it wasn't sinisterly done. Is that a word? Maybe it wasn't under a hood with a gain of function testing. Let's take this virus and infuse it with DNA and, go out and kill people. Genetic fusion happens while we're sleeping. And it happens all the time. And I'm not sure our scientists know this. And the fact that they were in a bat cave, and you go online, how did COVID start? A bat cave in Wuhan. All those virologists, remember, virology, they don't know immunology, or they don't know mycology, the study of fungus. They went in, dusted themselves off with all that histo on them, merged it with the RNA and the virus, and bang. Then they went to parties with each other, and they breathed on each other, and they coughed, and out comes the virus, half fungus, half virus. And that's the way it propagated. That's the way it spread, I think. And I don't think it's coincidental now that we're finding huge numbers of fungal infections inside the cadavers. I think, unfortunately, there were people who were, like you say, Pam, that were sitting ducks. If you merge cigarette smoking and alcohol and antibiotics, get ready. And if you're in your 50s, that's tough. If you're in your 70s, that can be very dangerous. So I think we'll make it through. It scares me how they're now talking about children and, the medications and the vaccinations and so forth. I think all of this might transcend true science when we reach out like that. And that concerns me. And I don't see a lot of good. Fortunately, like you said, there are a lot of doctors who are coming out, and man, they're being attacked by their own peers. Of course they are. They're questioning the pharmaceutical industry. You don't do that when you have a doctorate degree.
I think that's something else I would like to highlight too in this video, is just that when you see someone being attacked because they're questioning the standard narrative and they have everything to lose and really nothing to gain except, convincing some people, you should really be paying attention to those people. Mm-hmm. You really should, because that's how science has advanced all along the way. Was somebody made this crazy idea that, the earth did not rotate, or the sun did not rotate around the earth. It was the other way around. Yep. And the same level of persecution. So typically that is how truth comes about, is through all of these attacks. That's how it happened with Jesus. So he's in good company. We're in good company.
Yeah.
And that happens. But those people should at least pique your curiosity to say, well, what is it they are saying? What is it?
It's not the way it works, though, because we're taught to respect the medical community. We're taught, our moms, when we were sick, took us to the doctor. A loving mother and a loving pediatrician equals lots of antibiotics, lots of gut terrain problems, lots of, excuse me, lots of disease as we get older. And it all started with a simple, loving mom and a loving pediatrician. Antibiotics kill the good guys, and God put the good guys there. And there are negatives when that occurs, lifelong negatives. So it all starts with good terrain, good diet, etc. We have choices. We know soda pop. We know cigarette smoking isn't good, yet millions do it. So that's their choice. It'd be harder to convince a beer drinking, cigarette smoking, guy who's at the doctor every week that you got to change your diet than it would the three of us.
Right. One thing I've learned too is for myself, especially, I can't create a no list because, that's the law is meant to invoke our desire for sin. So if I create my no list, I'm just like thinking about what I can't have. I have to always create my yes list, and then I sit down and I look at my yes list and I'm like, well, what could I create with this? What could I make? What would be enjoyable? And I look for recipes that include my yes list and just, put the no list away and start focusing on your yes list, the good things that God gave us to put in our bodies and watch the creativity explode and just feel your mouth start watering as you think about, if I combine these two things.
So I've written 13 books on this subject, and they continue to sell. God is so good. Do you have the woman's book? I wrote that, I think, in 2018. It's our best-selling book. And then let me send you the diet guide also, each of you. And I'll just tell while Pastor Scott is here, we give a lot of these away. I now have indoor plumbing. I get to drive a car to work. I mean, I'm totally taken care of, but there are people who can't afford a $20 book. And so I say this all the time. We send a lot of books away free. And all we ask is those people, please read the book and study it. Don't become something you throw in the paper basket. Read it and study it. But that goes for you guys also. If you know of someone who really needs this information and whose heart would not only hear but heed the information, I'm all for that. But let me start. If you can just give Pastor Scott your mailing address and so forth, I'll send those two off to you, sign them and get them off to you. By the by, Pastor Scott, I saw a book on eBay that I had signed, and it sells for less than my non-signed book. That's how I want you just to know how important I am in the world.
That's awesome. That's funny. Okay. Good. Well, we have been, is there any, there's so many, we could go down so many tangents, but we are so grateful for this time. And I just feel like we just need to recap a little bit. I know, I did have one more question. What about garlic? Do you use garlic as part of your?
Oh my gosh. In Germany, I have a friend who's a pharmacist in Germany. Garlic is a prescription. You can't walk into the store. Yeah. Isn't this fascinating? Garlic, and you look at spices, and you look at, I give you every green. The cause is here, the remedy is here. We just turn a deaf ear because we're watching real science on TV. These are real science.
Right.
Garlic. Have you ever had the flu? Did you get COVID? Did you peel a garlic clove, put it in a sock, a cotton sock, and sleep with that? Number one, you wake up in the morning with this horrible taste of garlic in your mouth. But number two, the fever is broken and you feel like $1 million. Just as the germs are here, the cure is here. The treatment is here. Before pharmaceutical chemical companies started up, Rockefeller, what did we do, you guys? We had to turn to everything from blood-sucking, worms, to natural herbs, tree barks, Pata arco, the only tree that doesn't grow mildew on it because the bark kills fungus. So and let food be your medicine. The father of medicine was so right on that. I've been blessed with really good health. I don't watch football games. It's so amazing to me. When I used to watch football games and somebody would score a touchdown, the guys would jump and hug each other and drink a beer. And so my wife one time told me, I don't mind if you go over to Don's with all those guys and watch football games because the LA Rams or something were playing. But please don't drink. And I said, okay, no problem. Every time we scored a point, I reached on the coffee for the beer. Without the beer, football is no fun at all. So it makes sense. It makes sense that all the sponsors are beer companies. They know that psychology. If you're drinking alcohol and you're my age, in my humble opinion, you're either George Burns or you got a death wish. There are things we need to stop doing. Garlic is one of the most potent antibacterial, antiprotozoal, antiviral, antifungal, antipathogenic substances known to man. And who put it here? Pfizer? No, God.
Yep. Yeah, my kid, that was one of my go-tos when my kids were little, and they'd say, Mom, we don't want to smell like a pizza. And I said, that just makes you more yummy.
Doesn't matter what you smell like, it matters what you feel like.
Exactly. So, thank you so much for this time. So I'm going to just recap. I wrote some notes so everybody can kind of like circle back and say, oh my goodness, what all did he say? So you talked about the importance of sort of those baseline vitamins, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, get outside, get some exercise, get some sunshine, get some sweat moving, your vitamin B complexes. And then that just start with a diet and try, maybe eliminate one carb. But when you're thinking about your no, what are you going to replace it with? Always think about, okay, what am I going to do instead? What is the fun, and make it fun, some fun new thing that I'm going to replace that Dr. Pepper with, or, whatever it is.
Yep. Good.
And make that your goal. Just pick one thing and then pick up the diet that you have and just start looking through it and just begin to think, okay, is this possible? Could I make this change? Could I get my family on board? Could we start heading this direction? You don't have to do from 1, to 100. You can just do the next right thing, as our K-State coach now likes to say. And then, I would say get some garlic going in your diet. And I literally chop it up and stick it in a bowl of olive oil, like a whole bulb. And then just every day I'll just get a little, just drink it down. Don't chew it. But, put it in your mouth and swallow it.
Sure. Germs don't live in an antimicrobial milieu environment. Yeah. So what you're saying is really good.
And then to get maybe a bottle of colloidal silver, have that on hand, get some spray for your nose, get a spray bottle for your throat, and do that on a nightly basis and get your mucosa all coated for the night so that your body has the resources it needs to bite things off before they go any farther than that. And then if you've got long haul, if you've had COVID, if you've had the jab, if you've had some of these things that have put that spike protein in you, do some detoxing, get that sweat, do some baths, some hot baths. The other thing I have learned is nattokinase. Have you heard about bromelain nattokinase to help get the spike protein out of the body?
Some of the enzymes, nattokinase, lumbokinase, bromelain enzyme from pineapple. There are many. It's now suggestive that these enzymes have anti or detox pro properties. So nattokinase is a good one. I take it first, get up in the morning, and I take either a bromelain or a nattokinase, and it's wonderful. Then you got to wait 20 minutes, so take a quick shower, and then go ahead and have your breakfast. Which this morning I posted on my Facebook this morning. I said I decided to splurge. Business is good. We're making decent money finally, and so I splurge for breakfast, and I have an egg sitting, just one egg sitting there. Life is good. I can be on my diet and eat expensively now. One egg.
Yeah, no kidding. $6 dozen egg.
Yeah, exactly.
As dosage, what do you recommend on vitamin C a day for just like a maintenance?
For maintenance, I recommend a gram to 500 milligrams twice a day. I like the idea of prompting yourself twice with it. That's the information I got from the COVID deficiency. So get a gram in a day. Now, sore throat, stuffy, eyes starting to water. Oh, I just don't double or triple that. We now know that safely, most people don't. I'd never push it to bowel tolerance, but 3 or 4 grams when you're feeling kind of punk is a good thing.
And zinc, what do you think for maintenance?
50. 25 is a maintenance. 50, if you feel something coming on. Yeah.
Okay. And then vitamin D, what do you think on the maintenance?
Gosh, I take 10 IU. Remember, these are fat soluble. 10 IU, but I have friends who are doctors right down the street from me who are using 25 to 30 a day, especially with fat soluble nutrients, A, E, K. Be more careful of those. Be a little bit more judicious with your B vitamins and vitamin C that you know are going to be excreted in the urine than you do with fat soluble. So I'd say conservatively, I probably take it 4 to 5, 4 days a week, 10 IU.
Okay. And then it's maybe depending on how much sunshine you're getting as well and what part of the country you live in.
Yeah. Depending on where you live. I try
Right.
in the summer, I love it. I'll get a half hour out there working out. But in the winter, you got to kind of take a little bit more, vitamin D, D3.
Yeah. Okay. And then the beta glucase, that was new to me. I'd not ever heard about that. Is that something that you recommend, just kind of a maintenance type of thing?
There's one company that has worked for 20 years with University of Nevada School of Medicine, and specifically one of the most prominent immunologists in the United States. Ken Hunter is his name, Dr. Ken Hunter. He's been a guest on my show. This company is called NSC, NSC24.com, and they have what they call a micronized. They prepare this much differently than other beta-glucan, but let me just tease you a little. When you get oatmeal wet and it gets gluey, that's beta-glucan.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, you'll get beta-glucan in that, but its particulate is too large to fit onto what we call a receptor site. So that's why they need to micronize and make it tiny. That's what this company does. Now, this bottle is $120 for 30 capsules. Very expensive. I was a subject for this company when they came out with this. Only doctors could order this 2 years ago. And I talked to the president of the company and I said, I'd like to get on that. I love beta-glucan. So for 9 months, I've been on this dose. Normally 10 milligrams, a tenth of this, is what I took for years and years and years. But I'm a trial subject for this, hoping I don't end up like mom and dad and my sister did and my brother did, end up with cancer, again, so far so good, I think.
Is that one of the things that's helping in leaky gut? If it's kind of coating the intestines?
So leaky gut, psyllium helps with that.
Okay.
And then colostrum, when mom first started to breastfeed, colostrum. If you can't get human colostrum from La Leche League or from mom anymore, then look at bovine colostrum, but get it from grass-fed, grass-finished cows. So they don't have corn and wheat and so forth in their diet. That's good colostrum to seal up the gut. And then also L-glutamine, the amino acid, L-glutamine, G-L-U-T-A-I-M-I-N-E, L-glutamine. Okay. They help seal up a leaky gut.
What did I forget in our summary? Fear not. That's a big one. And
I live with that little guy. And I always find it in the dryer, So I started putting it in my briefcase. I think if we only knew how much we delegate the responsibility of our health to others we don't know. Mm-hmm. When something's wrong in your body. If it's minor, what did I eat? Oh, that's right. I worked out yesterday. I did squats. No wonder my back is so. Figure it out. I tell people who are symptomatic, and I've been doing this for 50 years, when did these headaches start? Not that they see the relevance in that, but It started 15 years ago. And I always tell a joke on stage, when did you get married? Oh, 15. No, my husband and I, we love antiques. We bought an old mid-century home. It was moldy. Try and figure out, how was it antibiotics that you were on? Was it a time in your 20s? I got to tell you guys, I overdrank in my 20s because if a car backfired, I wouldn't almost faint, from being in Vietnam. And alcohol just helped me tremendously. But the residues, the ethanol from alcohol, lives with you for long periods of time. So one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing now is trying to stop up and hope that I didn't take too many antibiotics, drink too much alcohol, and so forth. We can generally, I tell the patients, think back when this began and what was going on. Well, I had a root canal, lots of antibiotics. I moved into a home. I used to sleep in grandma's basement. The laundry was down there. It smelled horrible. And now I have chronic sinusitis. The Mayo Clinic published in 1999 that all chronic sinusitis is due to fungus. If you go to a doctor today, you're going on a fungus feeder drug. It's called an antibiotic. You need an antifungal, but penicillin penicillin-derived antibiotic is what they will put you on. This almost, in my humble opinion, assures that an acute problem will become chronic. The more antibiotics they throw at your fungal problem, and same with every malady we suffer from. Bronchitis, they're now saying don't give antibiotics. We have to initiate prudence with antibiotics. We're not going to do it. So we, the people, then have to know how much is too much.
And God does not leave us alone in that search for wisdom. He just wants to be the very first one we go to. And I will say there's been other times when I have used some of these supplemental things to, treat something that I'm going through acutely. And I kind of hit a wall, and I will go up for prayer on a Sunday morning and just be like, hey, I have hit a wall and I need supernatural help and wisdom. And don't forget that part, because there's been times when that prayer leapfrogged me, through 6 months of what I could have done naturally, or overcame, something that I, just did in a panicked moment that I knew wasn't great for my body. So,
and then remember also that we have a problem in pharmaceutical medicine. We also have a problem in nutritional medicine.
Right.
John and I always laugh and I get angry, but sometimes we don't accept an advertiser because we vet. Some of the stuff out there in nutrition, I would never recommend, but because I have a broad audience, I have to be very, very careful, in what I say. But there's a lot of not good stuff out there.
Right.
But I love what you said. Always turn to the Lord. That's where we're really healed from. Even if He directs us to an antifungal program, start and finish with the Lord.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's a great note to wrap up on. Scott, do you have anything you want to tie all this together with?
No, I'm good. Okay. It's been wonderful to listen, and I appreciate the extra innings, Doug. Appreciate it. It's been awesome.
Happy to help out. And by the way, Scott, if you really have people there who need help, I'd be happy to send you, a dozen of the diet guides that you can privately hand out to people and say, try this for a couple of weeks. All it takes is 2 weeks, and you'll see dramatic change.
Appreciate that. I'll get in touch with John on that. Yeah.
Good deal.
And Doug, would you mind sending us some links to some of the things that you shared about today?
I'll be happy to. How
things
do I do
that you held up, and if you.
John probably has Scott's.
Yeah,
I have ammunition. I was proud to sit there and say, I got that one. In fact, I've been using it now for probably 9 months, thinking maybe that's the cat's meow. But I went over to Amazon while you guys were talking. Doug, you said it was a lot of money. I'm seeing ammunition at the original formula at $19. I just want to make sure I got the right one. But
that's the right one. That's the 3 milligram. We used to call that a pediatric dose.
I see.
Scott, my background. I mean, I met Linus Pauling one time, and he was telling the doctors around us, well, you take like 50 milligrams of vitamin C. Now we know, 100 times that amount is okay.
Yeah. Okay.
beta glucan 25 years ago, 3 milligram was thought to be a good dose. Now we're all the way up. I know people who have taken 1,000 milligrams a day safely and overcome some real misery. You don't feel immune modulation. You just know, gosh, I'm not getting a disease. Everybody
That's
around
right.
me.
Yeah.
And with you, with a bunch of people, up on the pulpit there, you're exposed to a lot of things. So continue on it. And if we can get you guys breaks on it financially, let me know.
Good. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Doug.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Bless. Thank you.